Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone loved you so obsessively they'd reach past the grave to keep you forever? Today's guest is filmmaker Alex Domenici, the writer and director of the horror short Never Let You Go. In this conversation, we dive into the psychology of obsession, the blurred line between mental breakdown and the supernatural, and what it takes to bet everything on one nightmare. This is the Dark Mind Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please support it by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Alex Domenici. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey Vince, how are you?
Doing well, my friend. Thank you for joining me on this first day of February 2026. I came across your film Never Let You Go while scrolling through Alter and was amazed by not only the dark atmosphere, but also the slow creeping dread mixed with occultic conspiracy, all fueling a man's desperation to control and take a woman hostage, both physically and spiritually. The production quality was outstanding, the editing, color grading, sound design, and acting all blended seamlessly. I really enjoyed not only Never Let You Go, but also your other 3 films. So thank you for joining me on the show today to discuss them.
Thanks so much for the words. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the film, just to give a brief synopsis, is about a woman whose abusive ex-boyfriend reaches from beyond the grave to bind them together through an occult ritual. It's a story about trauma that refuses to stay buried, and that is where the story really takes off. So you said trauma is something that, quote, knows no distance in your film. What's the line between a haunting memory and a supernatural entity for you? And how did you want the audience to experience that blur?
Yeah, I think you touching on the word blurs is important. I really wanted to blur the lines because I feel like that's what the horror genre does so well. Something like trauma is something that we all obviously may experience in our life and are familiar with, but when you add a supernatural entity to it, you can really expand on it even more. I thought it was important to show what it's like to be trapped inside of that vulnerable mindset of um, facing your trauma and trying to run from it, and it truly just staying with you no matter where you go, and it knowing no boundaries. The film is really about um, trapping her into a point of confrontation with her trauma and her tormentor. Um, but with the supernatural aspect, you're able to really kind of expand on the metaphors of it and put you into a very physical setting of what that trauma can do to you.
And, I'm not the most well versed on production methods and whatnot, but for some reason, the beginning, that long shot of her from the hallway in the, I don't know if she's in like the living area, but it just kind of reminded me of one of those long Denis Villeneuve shots. Is that somebody you're influenced by at all?
Yeah, definitely. And throughout the film, that's one of the first shots that does it. But throughout the film, we're really trying to literally box her in and have it feel as if the walls are actually closing in on her before they actually do. Um, that was the first shot, and um, I worked with a very talented DP um, on just the cinematography of what we were trying to say. Every shot had to have a purpose. It wasn't just to be a cool shot. It was um, purposeful, and basically, we wanted to stay in that moment because it was a very intense moment, and we felt like cutting was going to kind of give you an escape. We wanted you to be glued to the screen, obviously, but really be pulled into that room with her, pulled into her trauma and what she's facing. And throughout the film, there are certain frames, as I said, to kind of hint at what we're going to be doing in the later half of the film.
And her first contact with the antagonist is through a tape recorder. You chose a tape recorder instead of something more modern like a phone or email. What does analog technology do to horror that digital can't? Is it the permanence, the physicality, or something else?
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with, especially cult stuff, I think obviously ancient rituals and stuff like that. I went back and forth on this a lot. I had gotten notes that kind of were a 50-50 split. It was you should do an email or you should do a message, and then other people have said how much they love the tape recorder. I personally think that a tape recorder is far more sinister. It's definitely more personal. Um, it felt to me like this individual to get inside of their head, their willingness to go this far in getting back our character Ellie. It it really felt like he would have a tape recorder. It felt like that was something that someone who is so deeply sadistic and unhinged would carry around. And I felt like modern technology, of course, there are going to be times that you need it, and but I always feel the classics, and I felt as if the tape recorder really added a much more sinister element to the film.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what it is exactly. It's almost like when you're playing it back, you're seeing the spool move as the voice is being projected, and if that slows down at all, it affects the basically the pitch of the voice. So it's almost as if like the tape is actually the mouth that's speaking the words, where you don't really get that effect with like a clean digital interface that's just reinterpreting zeros and ones.
Yeah, I think you can always find a way to make something creepy, and there's always um, some some way around things. But for me, like you said, especially when things really go off the rails, coming back to that tape recorder, spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and hearing his voice and all of the actions that are happening in the room, um, really added an element to me. I always talked about how the film is layered in the sense of you need to listen to what he's saying, but you also need to focus on what's happening in the room, all while trying to understand this woman's mindset and if what we're seeing is real or is it in her head. And so it's a very balanced dance that it needed to be, which is difficult to do. But I felt like the tape recorder was a good callback. It was easier to visualize it all when you cut back to the tape recorder and listening to his voice.
Well, how did you approach Victoria Sintra's performance to show both the external horror and the internal unraveling of her character?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely a project that I was very happy to be writing and directing and not acting in. Acting it to me is so involved. And she was obviously phenomenal in her performance, and I definitely put her through the ringer. We really prepped and prepped and prepped and prepped, and we had multiple conversations about what this character believes, what they were thinking in the moment, how they would act, the past trauma. Um, she even, went as far as to talk to our male actor about the backstory, and I loved how they were able to expand on that within their own time. And with a very intense performance, you have to kind of be careful about the camaraderie on set. As much as you want to have fun, and it's an amazing thing shooting films and working with the people you love, you need to respect the actors. And with that, I had spoken to her before. I had told her that I would address her as a character's name to try and keep her engaged. We constantly put on headphones for her whenever we were in between takes. I felt it was important for her to just stay in character as much as possible because to me, I know personally if I needed to act terrified and traumatized for 10 hours a day, I would definitely need something to get me there and keep me there. So it was a balancing act, and credit to the actors for being able to do that. But it was definitely a situation that we talked about before, and that it was going to be intense. And in order to do that, I wanted to respect, her craftsmanship and what she needed to do to get into character and stay into character. So it was a lot of headphones. It was a lot of her in the corner by herself, isolated. I really didn't want any of the crew to talk to her unless they absolutely had to, because when you're in between camera movements and you're talking about what this shot is and everything, and people are asking for what gear they need to bring in, and it's very difficult for an actor to stay in their role and just stand there and watch all the stuff happen on set. It almost, pulls you out of the film, and you want it to feel as if this is really happening. So it was important to get her away from that, call her back into set when we were ready, but she was, for the most part, I was isolated, and yeah, tried to come up with little tricks to keep her engaged. And she did a great job. It was definitely very mentally and physically taxing. So she was wonderful.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, it brought to mind I was watching a documentary about The Shining, how Kubrick had Shelley Duvall do scenes like specifically I think the one where Jack Nicholson is hacking through the door, the Here's Johnny, like what didn't he ever do it something insane like 90 times?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
where she was physically and emotionally just drained and on the verge of having a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, that was a tough, tough documentary to watch. Yeah, you try and it's tough because the actors and actresses, they all want the best performance, but sometimes when they're in the scene, they think they got it. We got it. It was great. I nailed it on that one. And when you have to say, we need one more, we need another one, you got to try it this way. Um, you try not to feel too guilty because they're going to be happy by the end that this was a great performance, and they listened and trusted the director. But it's especially in horror, it's so important to capture, even if it's real, real exhaustion or real tears because you're just physically had it for the day. It's so important that you obviously respect the actor and what they're asking for, but if they say fine, I can do it better, I can get it again, or I understand, then you got to go for it because at the end of the day everyone's exhausted, especially if you are very passionate about the project. But if you know it's for the greater good and the greater film, then it's very important.
Gotcha. Well, the cave location feels primal, buried, airless, inescapable. What did shooting in an actual cave teach you about claustrophobia that you couldn't have replicated on a sound stage?
Yeah, that was I had found that cave from a commercial I worked on years ago. And I remembered it because it was truly like the cave of my dreams when it came to horror films. And I went back to visit it and we scouted it, and I'll never forget, you can't see inside of the cave at all, even in noontime. It was noon. It was 95 degrees, peak summer. And I remember looking in and saying, wow, I remember how much I love this cave. And three giant owls flew out at us. We ducked down. I was like, oh man, this
It's a
is either a
sign.
mistake. Yeah, either a mistake or a sign. And I remember being like, I am out of my element. We are in the middle of nowhere and we're in a cave. But um, it was it was a very challenging location. Getting gear into a cave, it's very cold, it's tight. There's a lot of people in there that need to do their jobs. The actress is obviously seeing all these people and then being left in there by herself outside of our Steadicam operator. And to me, it was very important to have a real cave because we had gone back and forth on, hey, we're building the set for Ellie's house. Do we find a way to, make this cave on set? And I was so adamant about it being a real cave because to me, you feel it. You really can feel the scares more, and um, the energy is just completely shifted when you're walking through this cave and there's candles and there's flashlights and um, it feels like the cave's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. It was a challenge nonetheless because when you go from building a set to having control over everything, the light, where gear is going to be, where people are going to eat lunch, how the day is going to go to a T, and then you go to a cave, it's completely opposite. You're really, no matter how much you prep, no matter how you think things are going to go, or how the light's going to hit, it's completely different than what you think. But it was so rewarding. It looks great on camera, and I think that was the whole point. You need it to feel real. The moment you take someone out of a film and they say, that looks more like a set, or, that's not a real cave, it takes you out of it. It takes you out of the whole world that you just built. So, as difficult it was, the cast and crew were amazing. It was cold. It was tight, it was dusty, and it was, yeah, I mean, it was very difficult. Even my actress had a lot of difficulty that day, but she really stepped up, and the whole crew stepped up and really put their best foot forward and knew what we were trying to do. It was our last day of shooting, and I just said, just stay with me, guys. Trust me, this is going to be worth it. It's the real deal, and I'm so happy we went that route because it really made that epic conclusion and that confrontation so much better.
Yeah, you kind of answered a question I had. I was wondering, like, what is it like in a cave at 95 degrees? I assume it would be an oven, but you were saying that it was cold?
Yeah, it was cold. We scouted in the summer, but we shot in let's see, that was towards the end of January. But LA it was it wasn't a cold day, but inside of that cave was pretty freezing. We blacked out the entrance to the cave so the light wouldn't drip in. So obviously extremely dark, and you're not having the flattest pathway. So you really had to. I mean, my Steadicam operator, he was unbelievable for him to get some of those shots, and for no one to fall, trip, or get hurt was a blessing, because it was as real as can be, and it had been there for a while, and a lot of stuff has shot there before, but they really gave you free reign. There was no site reps looking out. Oh, are you guys doing all right? It was sort of like we had the cave for the entire day, and we took advantage of it. But it was definitely a challenge, but no regrets at all on picking that specific cave, shooting in a physical cave. It's everything. It makes everything more elevated for, especially as a filmmaker. You're like, this is what was in my head. This is what I wrote. This is where our character's supposed to be. And this is the story I'm trying to tell.
What's the name of the cave, or like, is it
Uh,
possible to look it up online?
yeah, it's in Acton, Los Angeles. There's multiple properties that this company has, but I believe it's White Cave Mountain. It's in Acton, Los Angeles, which is it was probably about an hour away. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. No cell signal, no anything. You're really in the elements.
Well, caves often symbolize both the womb and the tomb, a place of birth and death. Was that duality intentional when you chose that location for the climax?
It was mainly picked, obviously, for the home of our spiritual entity, Gulam. Obviously, every great monster needs a home, and the cave was where we decided to place him. And for me, a cave is one way in, one way out. Especially in the film, Ellie's one way out is closed off. She has nowhere to go but forward and towards Simon, to face off with him and confront him, which he obviously is welcoming because he's waiting for her and waiting for her arrival. But to me, the cave was, like I said, it was the face off place. There's nowhere else she can go. She has been pushed to this point so far, and it was basically, again, what is the worst thing that can happen to your character, especially in a horror film? What can you continue to put them through? If they just escaped a collapsing house inside of this ritual, what's the next worst thing? It's the cave that this creature was inhabits and where her ex-lover is because the ritual is continuing.
And I know there's a lot left up to interpretation in art, whether it be film, literature. In your mind, is the supernatural in this film quote unquote real, or is it the visual language of a mind trying to metabolize something it can't face directly?
Yeah, so it was important, like I said, to blur those lines, because I didn't want it just to be absolutely straightforward. That's why I sort of trapped us in her mindset. You have an unreliable narrator who, could potentially uh, be having a complete meltdown. And by the last shot is when you fully reveal it, or the latter being that this truly horrifying thing that we thought maybe wasn't happening and it was in her head and she just got triggered by this phone call, actually is real and the ritual is real and she is trapped in eternity in Gulam's realm. So by the end, the goal was to show that it actually was real and the ritual was complete.
Well, as I spoke about earlier, the fantastic production quality, the sound design, from what I understand, was done at Sony with top tier horror specialists. What specific feeling were you chasing with the audio? I mean, obviously claustrophobia, but
Of course, I always feel like, I mean, sound design, no matter what, is so important. Sound is so, so important to make you feel everything that you're trying to put on screen. But to me, in horror especially, if you really want to get under people's skin and really trap them and make them feel the scares and the jolts and all the elements within the film. It was so important for me to get that sound and such a talented team, lifelong friends because of it. Such an amazing experience, but it was really about elevating everything, elevating all of those moments within the room, all of those moments within the cave. I mean, that the cave alone is so difficult to get good sound because you're in such a foreign area and there's so many elements going on. And the sound design team was just unbelievable to basically trap us within that cave and the Gulam sounds echoing off the cave walls, um, the noises of him crawling along the walls. It really was just to elevate the experience. And I'll never forget watching it in the movie theater and just hearing it and how amazing it was and being at Sony Studios and watching them work and just the speakers absolutely blasting the film. Um, how it was at that moment that I realized that I was proud of the film because it brought everything to life. Sound is usually one of the last things that happens, and you have these sounds in your head. You have these moments. This is what it's going to sound like. This is what it should feel like. Until it's done, you really don't know if it's working. And when they were just fine tuning everything and bringing everything to life, I realized, wow, this is actually a pretty intense film, and there's a lot happening, and you feel everything, and you feel like you're trapped in this room, and you are experience all the things that I wanted you to experience. So it's just so important to have good sound and to know what you're trying to stay on screen and also hear on screen. I really think that's important. Again, especially in the horror genre.
So I need you to put, if you can, to put a rumor to bed. Since you've dealt with some pretty top tier sound designers, I'm a big fan of Gaspar Noé, and I thought that it was a fact, but then I heard it was more of a rumor that he used beta waves, like binaural beats in the sound design because supposedly those frequencies, which is what, 13 to 30 hertz, cause anxiety. Is that something that's actually done?
I have heard that as well. With this film, that wasn't really mentioned or uh, put to the test, but um, I can tell you, whatever people think sound design is and what they do, it is nowhere near what they are able to do, capable of doing, and do on these films. It's pretty amazing. Now, of course, I always say I'm cursed because now when I watch these films, I'm like, oh, the sound design. I think they sort of should have done this or they messed up here. Now I watch movies and I appreciate it so much when the sound design is there because you realize that what's on screen is, of course, can be horrifying and scary, but it really is the sound design that'll get you. That's going to make your jump scares. That's going to make you want to look away from the screen. Hearing creaks and crawling in the darkness is always going to be scary. Obviously, yes, where you put the camera is purposeful, but that sound design, when it is on point, it really does something.
Yeah. Well, the story hinges on a ritual meant to bind two people together forever. What's the scariest human truth underneath that idea for you?
Yeah, it's funny. When the film was released on Alter, going through the comments, and just seeing how people are reacting to it. And there were a few that that was sort of the whole point is they said, "Wow, nothing scarier than being trapped with your ex for eternity." And someone else someone else would say, "There's nothing scarier than your ex." And wow, this is so scary to think that I they could possibly do this. So to me, it was again when I write horror, I try and write just what is the worst thing that could happen to this character, and putting them in that position to have to either overcome or be defeated by it. But it was definitely about like that whole the relationship and a relationship breaking down and what does that look like? Usually, sometimes one person doesn't want it to end and the other person is moving on and ready to move on. Um, but then to um, be pulled into something unwillingly was scary to me.
So, from what I read, building Gulam's lair, for those that haven't seen the film, we've been talking about a cave, but within the cave, there's a kind of a structure. From what I understand, this was your first constructed set. Is that correct?
Yeah, the office, Ellie's home office, it was a completely built set. The hallway, the office, the entire. made to look like her apartment office is a constructed set. Just unbelievable.
So, how did physically creating that nightmare space change your relationship to the horror you were putting on the screen?
Yeah, that's a great question because early on, you know, when finances are tighter or you're thinking this is going to be our budget, okay, you start looking at locations. Let's look at this house, or oh, this has a decent sized office, or oh, this looks like it could possibly work, but we're going to be tight with the camera. The camera won't be able to move as much. And I remember my DP saying to me, you really want to do a lot with this film. I know I've read the script, I can tell, but you really have no limitations if you build. And it just hadn't been on my radar because I always felt like I'm making a short film. I need to, watch my money. I need to be smart with how I spend things. And it just never crossed my mind. And then when he said that, I kind of went back to the script and said, if I really want to tell the story I want to tell and do what I want to do and show these tricks and really make this room horrifying, I have to build. So from then, I went back to the script and I said, okay, well, if I'm building, then I get to do more. So now the walls are going to close in. Now we're going to have this window here, and this red beam is going to come through this window, and this is going to work this way. And you just open up Pandora's box to a bunch of options. And it was amazing because there's no way I would have been able to make this film if I shot it on location. It wasn't going to work out. The look wasn't there. It was, I had this design in my head. My production designer absolutely nailed it. She knew what I expected. She knew what I wanted. And walking onto that set and walking down that hallway and seeing the room that was in my head for months and months and months, and who I had tried to say, this is what the room needs to look, this is how the camera needs to move within this room, um, this is this is how the walls are going to close in. To see it all is one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. I remember it was the first day of shooting. We had pre-lit and made sure everything was set up. And I remember being one of the first ones to set because I just couldn't wait to get there. And I remember going into the room. No one was there. I closed the door and I just sat in the room because I was like, this is amazing. This is truly amazing. I am in a room that was built in my head that is now on stage, and we're going to shoot in it, and it's going to look exactly how I wanted it to look as far as when I wrote the script. Um, and then seeing how the walls were able to push in, it was just nobody could believe what I was telling them at the beginning, that this is what we had to do and this is how it was possible, and this is what I was willing to do, and I was going to find a stage that we could build on. And when it all happened, it was amazing to look back on. It was amazing in that moment, just sitting in the room and saying, wow, this is literally my room that I made. And my production designer built from the ground up. It was the most rewarding thing out of my filmmaking experience because it really felt like you were elevating your career and you're moving up the ranks. And now it wasn't just, we have to shoot it in my bedroom because that's what it is. No, it was, we're going to go for it. And if we're going to respect this project and what we're trying to do, and I'm going to respect everyone's time, we need to build.
Your nightmare made manifest. So that's actually one thing I was wondering about. So the walls closing in, that wasn't something that was done in post. That was an actual practical effect.
Yeah. So the walls are on, casters. So they have wheels on them. On the back, you have about, I think we had 4 to 5 people on each wall. Obviously, timing was an issue. You say, okay, we're rolling action and walls, and if the left is moving a half a second before the right, you're going to notice it. So it took a while, and I knew it was going to take a while, but we factored that in. We had them pushing in the walls. Actually, the side table where the sunflower is on is drilled into the wall. That is to make sure, obviously, when our actress is running through, it's not falling and you're running into any safety issues. She was obviously amazing. We did it multiple times. And then we knew going in that after pushing in the walls, I just wanted to add in some camera shake, and I wanted to add in a little bit of the debris falling from the ceiling, which you'll see in the final film. But as far as the walls moving in, yes, that was all done on the day. And it was a lot of planning, a lot of prepping. But again, I said, if I'm going to build on stage, I'm not just going to build a room to be in a room. We need to make this room, nightmare fuel. And every decision was made based off of that.
Well, so you invested most of your life savings into this project, which I imagine adds a layer of real world desperation to the production. Do you think that off screen pressure bled into the tension we can see on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I try and hide any pressure that's on me from anyone in the crew or in the cast. Obviously, there were a couple sleepless nights for me thinking about it, but then I just feel like I let it all go and said, this is what I want to do. This is why I'm here, and this is my calling. This is what makes me happy. And you need to do what makes you happy. And this is the film that I wanted to make, and I wasn't going to take any shortcuts with it. But of course, when you're on set and something's not working or something's taking longer, you do get a little nervous. And even on the cave day, there was issues with just the pace of how we were going about the day, and um, all I could think of was, please don't have it all fall apart on the last day, or don't let the walls look corny by being pushed in. But you try not to, you don't want to, there's enough pressure on everyone. Everyone wants to make something great. Everyone wants to make a great film. No one goes in to make a mediocre film. We all want to make something special that people are entertained and enjoy. But it's it's really just owning it, accepting it, and going in and saying, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to give it my all. We prepped and prepped and prepped. Everybody worked so, so hard on this. And it was just about letting it go. Money, I always say, isn't real. It's going to come back. And if you truly believe in what you're doing, it's not going to be a big deal at all. And I'm so happy I did, because a lot of people were questioning and said, "Oh, well, you could do this with that." And they were all very normal things that people do with money. And this is obviously very unorthodox. And I don't expect everyone to understand that movies cost money, and sometimes you need to put in those extra dollars to get a high quality product. But it was important for me to do that. I wanted to show what I was capable of with a little bit of money behind me, and I knew that money wasn't going to come from anyone else. So, like I said, you have a little bit of fear at the beginning and a little bit of imposter syndrome, and that sort of kind of runs through you for a little, and then you sort of just let it go and say, "Hey, I'm going to give it my all. I owe everyone who's given me their time my all. Everyone's time is valuable that's spending it with me. Everybody could be sitting on the couch watching football, and they're in a cave with me shooting a film. So you just sort of let it go and just go into it and give it your all."
Yeah, I guess like a better way to phrase it was more like, was it expressed into your directorial style, kind of like the way Van Gogh's very vibrant, colorful paintings like Starry Night were kind of fed by his manic episodes? Were any of the elements of the force and pressure upon the characters, or just the ambiance or atmosphere in the movie, kind of fed by any pressure? Like, did you kind of harness it in a way?
Yeah, I mean, when it's just you and it's your money, the pressure of, yes, the walls feel like they are closing in, definitely is real, um, because you're going into it and saying like, this is all on me. If it doesn't work out, it's really all on me. And I think that sort of those moments are kind of like those long takes where life doesn't really cut the way that a film does. It feels like those long takes where you're sitting with your thoughts and analyzing your decisions. And that's sort of why there's sort of those long takes in some of my films that I find to be trap you within that mindset. And that's kind of it can trap you in that mindset of um, is this going to work? Is this the right thing to do? Um, and yeah, it doesn't go away, the pressure, but you just need to know how to handle it.
Gotcha. Well, Ellie opens the box despite instinct. Is there a human flaw that that moment exposes? I mean, is there more to her than just being trapped by a psychotic ex? Is she engaging in any sort of self-sabotage or anything like that?
Well, I think it's, curiosity killed the cat. And, she knows that she just got a mysterious box on her doorstep, and she just got a call that her ex has committed suicide and, left sort of cult symbols and stuff at the crime scene, and they discovered all these things. So I definitely wanted her to have that moment of, I know this is him. I never want to hear his voice again, but I do want to hear what he has to say based on the events that have happened. And again, it goes back to opening Pandora's box and what that does, um, because obviously by hitting that tape recorder and listening to what he has to say sort of initiates all of this ritual to go on, because as the film progresses, she's unable to shut his voice off, which traps her again in the room and to his sick game that he's playing.
Well, from the film's Screamfest premiere to its altar drop, what moment confirmed the psychological horror actually landed, not just the technical craft?
Yeah, I mean, both were amazing to hear. I had submitted to Screamfest before, and when you get denied from a film festival, sometimes you think that the sky is falling. And, I took it as I just need to become a better filmmaker. And I got accepted for Never Let You Go. And I remember being so excited. And that night, I'll always remember it was a Sunday night Chinese theater. Everyone came out. All of the photos on the red carpet and the staff was incredible. I mean, that screen alone, that theater alone, you just feel it. And I remember sitting there and I wanted to sit up high. I usually am more of a middle guy in the theater, but I wanted to sit up high and I wanted to just watch everyone's reaction and see if the things that I thought were going to work were working. And um, I remember the sound was just unbelievable in the Chinese theater. I mean, that screen is gorgeous. And I remember obviously the applause when the credits came up and the amazing feeling it was. But I remember my father was sitting next to me. He flew out from Boston for it, and I remember him just patting me on the hand and saying, "I'm so proud of you." And I was like, "Wow, this actually worked. This played out the way I wanted to." And then going up and hearing everyone with their questions, and after the screening, people coming up to you, one saying that they really enjoyed the film, but having questions, wanting more, wanting to know certain things. It said to me that the film wasn't just 16 minutes of horror and now you go off to the next film. It stuck with them a little bit, and that was really important to me.
Are these your folks?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
them.
All right.
Yeah, so it was a big, big, big turnout.
Awesome.
That's my friend Mike. He had a film at the festival as well, and he's actually the co-writer to the feature script of Never Let You Go that we wrote together. So
Oh,
we're
okay.
hoping we're hoping for that to be our next project.
All right. You said this is Mike?
Yep, that's my
All right.
friend Mike. Yeah.
Shout out to Mike. Well, let's see here. So, post Ultra release, viewers have been dissecting the ending online. Did you design it to loop in their heads like an intrusive thought, or is that just the way trauma stories land?
Yeah, I think especially today's day and age, you have a lot of elevated horror, and you go back to the Babadook and the metaphors and what those mean. Um, I try to, like I said, blur the lines during the film and throughout the film, but it was important for me. I wanted that last shot to sort of signify that the ritual was real and that it's complete. Um, but I did like hearing from how people interpreted that. That's actually it's a good point because the feature script really dives into that a little bit more and what that does to your mind and how a vulnerable mind can be taken advantage of, questioning reality, which then the viewer questions. So it's an interesting dance. Obviously, with a short, you have to be. I personally find you need to have a beginning, middle, and end that's clear if this story were to end. But with the feature, you're obviously able to explore more avenues and things have legs that you can kind of go down and run with. But it was for me, it was final, and it was the nail in the coffin that the ritual was complete, and that everything that you just saw actually did happen, even if she was a traumatized person who struggled with questioning her reality.
Well, and you just touched on my next question, which was the short film is a proof of concept. So, the feature, does the story expand outward into more victims and mythology, or does it go deeper into Ellie's psyche?
So yeah, the feature is still Ellie's story. It's just much more involved into what happened to her. Um, in the past, how that's affected her, and her story of trying to overcome this trauma. But I would be lying to you if I said that don't have the sequel already in my head, and I truly feel with the ritual that you have franchise capabilities here to take this wherever. And that was sort of the goal that the main thing is this ritual that can kind of go anywhere, which you've seen in other films. It can go to all different types of characters and all over the world. So it was um, it was important to do Ellie's story first and really tap into that trauma of it all. But I really want to explore this ritual, which I do in the feature. But I'm always going to give you little breadcrumbs and not the entire ritual. I want it to expand.
Gotcha. Well, great film. Listeners at home, the link will be in the description, but you can easily find it on the Altered channel on YouTube. But you have some other films as well, which me and my wife sat down. You know, I'd seen Never Let You Go, but me and my wife sat down one night and just kind of went through your YouTube channel. It scared the shit out of our dog at one point. It was it was when the I'm not going to say which film, but when the clown ended up in bed very quickly. Your film Call from Kelly turns a normal video call into slow burn dread. What do you think screens do to trust, intimacy, and paranoia that makes them such a clean horror weapon?
Yeah, I think it sort of goes back to what I was saying about long takes. The call from Kelly is told entirely through a FaceTime call. And I think we've seen it in some found footage films, and it to me traps you in the situation in a very realistic situation. It traps you and makes you see it unfold in real time. And I think that's so primal and scary because, like I said, when you do cut away, you can have those moments of taking a breath and getting your bearings. But when you are just in it and you're stuck in it, and that's sort of what Call from Kelly does, is it keeps you within this conversation, a 15-minute conversation that's about a home invasion. And by keeping you there and seeing every single reaction and detail, um, it's scary because, like I always say, found footage to me is the scariest subgenre because it's it feels real. It feels real as can be. Obviously, a scare in a cinematic film is always going to be scary, but when you nail found footage and you nail the realistic approach to it, it definitely does something. Especially to me, I feel like. Um, Especially with screens. I wanted to show we all use them. And again, I try and just take something that could happen to anyone and make it as horrible as possible.
Yeah, and it's funny, one word I'd say more clever how you made the phone not only the witness but also an accomplice in a sense. I'm not going to reveal, how that
Yeah.
happens, but yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely it's definitely a film when you go back and watch it the second time, you can catch a lot of stuff. And when you're watching two screens, sometimes it's tough to kind of know which one to watch. But when you finally do get to that ending, you're going to be watching a different screen on the second time.
Hmm. Yes, indeed. Well, your film, The Clapper, you strip the protagonist of their physical agency through paralysis. Is vulnerability the most essential ingredient for you when designing a horror scenario?
Yeah, I think it makes everything scarier. I really do. Again, just going back to the worst possible thing. That character is handicapped, and um, there is obviously nothing worse for her than, having some entity inside of the house and her being unable to escape. But yeah, I think vulnerability is just it makes you feel for your character more. It's sometimes so difficult to have you resonate with a character in a short film. And if you can do that, I think, one of the ways to do that is by obviously feeling awful for the situation they're in and how vulnerable they are. And it really makes it a David and Goliath situation where the odds are against them and you're just hoping that the underdog comes out on top.
Yeah, and it seems like the more agency they have, the more prone you are to armchair quarterback what they're doing. Like, for anywhere from just straight up to get the hell out of there, you dumbass, to, oh, why did you let him do that? Or why didn't you hang on to the knife? Stuff like that.
I also hate when, it's like, just run out the front door, just do this. Why don't you do this? So you always have to try and write into ways of why they can't do that and why they're in the
Inescapable. Yeah.
situation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like Reagan from The Exorcist, that's your daughter. She's possessed. You can't just leave her. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to you have to think about those things because the moment you have that just run out the front door, it makes it less scary. So if you're gonna trap someone, they need to actually be trapped.
Yeah. Well, your film Arts and Crafts corrupts a child's safe activity. What's your philosophy on using childhood innocence in horror? Is it about contrasting light and dark, or is there something inherently sinister lurking in those, quote, safe spaces?
I think, that there's the childhood innocence and especially as a kid, their imagination of what's in the dark is so much more terrifying than when you're an adult, because their imagination just wanders. And I really like to play with that because I find that it's it brings me back. I mean, we all can remember something scary that happened to us, and um, I remember being in my basement and that classic, I mean, the classic Home Alone scene when the furnace turns on and he thinks it's a monster. It's just certain things like that make everything scarier from a child's point of view. And obviously, child actors can be something that people, shy away from. But I personally think you can really get so much out of them because they're as real as possible. If they're scared, you'll see it on their face. You'll know it.
Hmm. And the one film which I think was actually a student film, Skate Rat, is that correct?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
didn't, I couldn't find where to watch that. I don't know if you have it up anywhere or not, but could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was my senior project for college, and I remember our teacher said, if you want to, write a film, anyone can write their films, and we'll decide on who brings the best script. And I remember bring it into class and saying like mine's probably not going to get picked and I don't really care. I just wanted to write something and get it off my chest. And no one had written anything. So he said, if no one's written anything, then I'm going to provide a script of my liking and I promise you won't like it. So I had said, I have my script. And so it ended up being the film we made. That was obviously when you're in college and uh, directing and writing, it's a lot different than where I am now. But that was one of the first films that really felt like you were on a real set. We were all so passionate. You're young and firing on all cylinders, and everyone has a job or multiple jobs. And I'm still friends with some of the folks that I went to college with and worked on that. It was such a fun experience. Obviously, you're so stressed and um, don't know if you're making a good movie at that time. You really don't really know how to make a great movie at that time, but it was definitely something I was proud of. And I remember we said we have to make an IMDb for it, and that's why that's still there. And I like to keep all my projects because I think it shows the growth, and that's what I'm trying to do. Every film needs to be better than the last. And you're kind of a tortured soul when it comes to that sometimes, but you want to constantly be getting better and showing that you're getting better. And I feel like that's how my films have progressed. You do see the level change in each one.
Well, kind of piggybacking off of that thought, you've stated that you believe in the quote, I am manifestation. Which I am affirmation actually showed up in a concrete production decision rather than just your mindset?
I honestly think there were a few people, especially with Never Let You Go, there were a few people that said to me, don't feel like you have to um, spend all this money and do all this. There's other ways we can think of another idea, or you could do something else. And I had gone back and forth, and you listen to everyone, and you value everyone's opinion. Um, but I just had those moments where I literally was like, I'm gonna do this, and um, I'm going to make something great. And you just have to shut off all the outside noise because there's always going to be people telling you to do something else or hit the easy button or try this or cut corners. And I always believe, it's not about, there's not a ton of competition out here because I'm only competing with myself. I'm only trying to be the best filmmaker I can be. And I just wanted to say by the end of this film, and, when the credits came up, Never Let You Go, I wanted to say to myself that I am a good filmmaker. And I did have that moment because even though I appreciate all the praise for the other films. I finally felt like, you know what, I made my first film that I'm truly proud of. Again, I'll always be able to nitpick everything and say I needed to do this better, or next time I'm going to do this. But for the most part, I remember sitting in Sony Studios, and I remember being in the Chinese theater and having that moment where I said, you know what, I am a pretty good filmmaker, and I'm only going to get better.
What would a younger you with a camera 20 years ago, what would he say if he watched Never Let You Go?
He would probably say,
Badass dude.
you, no, he would say, you have gotten better at your craft, and I know how, and it was just because of hard work. I don't feel like I was given any talent or God-given talent that was passed down to me. I think it was hard work, and I think my younger self would say, "You worked hard, and it shows." This is a good project to show what you're capable of, and I'm excited to see what you do next.
Well, here's another thought experiment that involves time. When you're on the set and something goes wrong, equipment fails, time runs out, shot doesn't work, what's your first emotional response and how different is it now than from, let's say, 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, I would probably be freaking out. Um, and I mean, no doubt about it. I would be freaking out and panicked as to how this happened. What did we do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why did this have to happen to me? Why did this have to happen today? Uh, how are we going to overcome this? Um, Today, I try and prepare for everything, but there are things that you just can't prepare for. And you need to understand that. And you need to understand that stuff going wrong, it's no one's fault. It's sometimes you could prepare for everything and it still is gonna go south on certain things. And you just have to remain calm because everyone, especially if you're the director, everyone is looking at you. That's the temp check, you. If you're panicked, you're agitated, or you're blaming people, which you just can't do, it's gonna trickle down and it poisons the well. If you remain calm, if you are appreciating trying to problem solve, if you start problem solving yourself and thinking about where you can go with this, or sometimes they're blessings in disguise and you can say, hey, that's actually better because you know what, we're going to do this instead, and you look at it in post and say thank God that happened. But you really can't panic because I remember feeling like the world was against me if something went wrong, and of course this happens to me, I have the worst luck ever. And now it's like, hey, it's the film business. It's what it is. How are you gonna react to it? And that makes or breaks the day. It makes or breaks the film because, again, if you incite panic and have people nervous and um, feeling like they're walking on eggshells, it's gonna trickle down and it's gonna make the entire day a lot longer. So you just have to stay calm and understand that it's ebbs and flows. And how are you gonna overcome this?
Gotcha. Well, outside of film, what's one thing you do that has nothing to do with career or productivity, but keeps your head from going to a dark place?
I would have to say that would be going to music festivals. Anyone who has never been to a music festival, it is such a life-changing experience. I love being around music in general. I'm always, always tapped into all types of music. But being around it and getting away from my phone and being around friends and happy people and knowing that this is your vacation and you worked so hard for this, it really keeps me grounded because I really think it is a balancing act. And I am a workaholic, and again, I am a tortured soul who always feels like they need to be doing more. But if I can get that music festival in and be around music for the weekend and around my people, it brings me back. And, then it's back to the hunger, and you want to do more now because you had your fun. Okay, I had my fun. Now I need to get back to the script, or Now I need to give notes on this edit. And it's a balancing act, yes, of course, but it really does make me a better person. I feel as if I'm happier and more appreciative of everything because if you stay locked inside of your place and you're just constantly banging your head against the wall on a script or film, it really just does take you to a dark place. And if you can step away from it and come back to it, you start seeing a different film. You start saying, wow, actually, this is actually working. Before, I used to think this is the worst film known to man, and I don't want anybody to see this. But now I'm actually thinking that this might be worth a shot.
Solid. All right. Well, Alex, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Vince. I really appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate you reaching out. This has just been amazing to talk about everything and kind of reflect on the entire process.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your viewers know about?
Just honestly, if you have it in your mind that you want to do something and you believe that it's going to be something that's going to bring you joy, do it. Take it from me. It was a long battle and it was so worth it. And I don't plan on stopping. And this was honestly the defining moment for me to realize that my filmmaking career is going to continue.
Mic drop. All right. Well, listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Alex, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks so much, Vince.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.